you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Looks Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the airline sings that makes the official welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the oldest living podcast that still broadcasts only 1 to 2 shows a day. No one else is doing that from the original handful of podcasters. They have an infrequent schedule, and they're old. But I'm not that old yet. At least that's what I keep telling my niece that won't work. So refer the family to your family and friends to the show. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today, amazing young lady on the show. We're going to be talking about her book called Written Off: Navigating Rejection and Faith in the Search for Love, Family, and Belonging by Lisa Phillips. We're going to be getting into it with her and talking about her insights and some of the series that's coming out of this first book. She is a retired military wife, former pre-kindergarten teacher, and certified wisdom coach through the Adventures of Wisdom in Coaching program. Her life and work are rooted in the hope of Isaiah 43:18-19, which speaks of God making a way where there seems to be none. After walking her own path through childhood rejection and emotional invalidation, she found her purpose by teaching children crucial mindset skills that lead to overall improved mental awareness. Welcome to the show, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
I'm doing excellent. Give us .coms, websites, Facebooks, wherever you want people to get to know you better on the interwebs.
Okay. Website is www.authorlisaphillips.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book?
Okay. So it is my story of parental rejection from my mother, who had, or still has, an unmanaged, untreated mental illness going back to the 70s. And it's a part memoir and part biblical truth, where I start one chapter with my story, and then we move into another the next chapter with a spiritual truth. It uses metaphors from the Bible, unknown stories, unknown characters, or lesser known, to teach the point. I delve into what the spiritual side of rejection is, some of the symptoms and how they manifest in our life, especially as we get older. And it is a progression, since it's a trilogy. It doesn't just start with one thing of you're rejected. It is with estrangement and relationships. It can be very complex if there's trauma or abuse and downward circumstances in the home.
And your memoir explores parental rejection and the wound of not receiving the parent. Tell us more about this blessing and why it's important in children's emotional and spiritual development.
Yes, the origination of my interest in that came from when I was going through my teen years, which were the most brutal for at home, when everything got very dark in the home. And I went on in life and got married and all that, had kids, and I kept thinking, what is it that I missed? Why do I feel, you can't put a name to it. It was just, you know what's missing is significant, but you can't figure out really what it is. And this is in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have the internet to go Google something. And so when I came across a book called The Blessing by Gary Smalley and John Trent, that was the aha moment. I missed the parental blessing. Yes. And what that is the unconditional love and acceptance that's either withheld or never given at all. And there are 5 elements to the blessing. And I took the whole course and got a certification through it, so I could really understand it, because I knew it fit in my story. So there's 5 elements. There's appropriate and meaningful touch, the high fives, the hugs, wrestling around on the floor with your kids, that touch is important. We need touch. We're connected people. And then the second is the spoken message. Words have power for conveying to our kids to build them up, but words can also tear down. So that's vital. Attaching high value. This is a third one. We need to recognize our children's intrinsic value. And we do that with the idea of value. Think of a picture of the scales. You've got the scales inside. The meaning to bless is to get down on your knee. But when we want to treat someone well, we want to add value to them. Think of putting coins on the scale. And it gives weight, and weight means value. And likewise, when parents step back, we're taking a back away from them. We're stepping back. So if you have children that have traits that are really admirable, like leadership, you could give them a visual picture or something physical. For leadership example, you could give them a picture of an eagle that child will always tie that trait that they have into something that they can use later. So they remember this. And then the last one, the fourth one, is picturing a special future, which means if you see your kids that they are really good at something, we need to invest in that. I was really good at writing when I was younger. I loved writing, starting when I was 9, but I didn't have anyone speak to me into that, what you could do with your writing. My son's really good with his hands when he was little with the Legos. And I would tell him, I can see a future with you using your hands. And then the fifth one is active commitment. We want to build on these things, 1 through 4. And parenting doesn't stop when you turn 18. So, so you want to just continue on in a different fashion. Now it's a mentoring relationship instead of more parenting. But so anyway, I realized that I was missing a lot of these. And it was the key to realizing what that void was. And a lot of people out there I know in the 70s and 80s, we grew up differently with our parents. We were parented like our parents were and forth. And I think it just took years for me to fill in a lot of blanks.
Yeah. You're kind of like, why do I seem to have this hole? And sometimes we don't recognize we're young, but as we get older, our minds give it back to us and be like, I think you're old enough to handle this now, or try and process it. And so sometimes we block out those things in childhood. Now, it looks like, from what I understand, you grew up longing for your mother's love, yet you faced rejection, emotional distance, a parental wound. What was going on with your mom? Or I don't know if you have a diagnosis. Was this a bit of narcissism, or was she just alien to affection or intimacy in that way?
It didn't come out till many years later, but she had been abused.
Yeah.
And my parents, we had, in the 60s, we were a typical American family. My dad was an airline mechanic for TWA. My mom was a nurse. And we lived in suburbia. And then in 1969, my dad put in a transfer to San Francisco Airport because he had a hand condition, and he would come home with rags with blood coming through because of the harsh winters.
Oh, wow.
So we moved in 69 to Santa Cruz Mountains in California, and my mother didn't do well there. And
really?
A depression started, and then a full-blown mental health breakdown, nervous breakdown. And she went back to Kansas. That's where we're originally from.
Really?
And went into a facility, and I was 9. And so
suddenly mom's gone too.
Yeah. And she came back, and we thought we were fine. But back in the 70s, there was no real treatment. There was couples counseling, but nobody had mental illness involved. And so she dropped out of that and then decided she didn't need medication, that everybody else was the problem.
Oh, yeah.
And the saying is true, broken people or hurt people. Yeah. But it did go darker. My parents split up, and we came back to Kansas. My dad remained out there with his job, and my mom remarried suddenly again, and it all started all over again.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and it just got worse. The narcissism, the controlling, the criticalness, the judgment. Oh my goodness, the gaslighting. We didn't even have that term back then.
Yeah, that's classic narcissism right there.
Yeah, and I remember being told, you don't live in reality. You need to get your head out of the clouds. You just don't think, you don't use your head, blah, blah, blah. And that, I had nothing to come back for that.
You're just a kid.
You're just a kid.
You're like, I don't know how to deal with this. What's going on?
And we're not. Kids don't have the mindset skills to understand that.
Yeah.
She developed a darkness and a bitterness. There was an inner rage going on. And so when I write, I don't write in revenge at all. It's understanding that she was broken too. And although parent me correctly or better, what's that saying? She meant it for harm and God meant it for good. But it did make me think there was something wrong with me. I was always told I was the problem. And so you go off to college, and what happens is with a parenting style like that, you don't have self-confidence. Self-identity is destroyed or underdeveloped. Fear of failure, self-doubt, insecurity. And I had many of those. In fact, I lost a dream of mine because of fear of failure.
Really? Wow. What was the dream?
I got halfway through the teaching program for elementary education. And when I got to the point of the student teaching, where a peer teacher would be in the back of the room to see how I do with kids, I felt the judgment and the criticism. And so I feared I'd fail. So what I did is I quit before I was told I'd fail.
Oh, no.
And I bailed from the whole program.
Wow.
Because I didn't think I was good enough. I feared the rejection.
Yeah.
And so I rejected her before and I tell that story in the book.
It's a powerful story, because when you're in that situation where you have that rejection wound, it carries over, right?
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't overcome that for quite a long time. And I've had a lot of regret with that. But some of these symptoms, that I was just saying, and fear of failure and lack of confidence, the spiritual side is rejection is a demon. Rejection enters a kid's life because of trauma or abuse, or even as fatherless homes. And unfortunately, parents don't know that they open the door to that because of what the unfortunate foundation their kids are on. And so what happens is Satan's very clever. He targets children. They're vulnerable. They're like prey. And so this is why the parental blessing is so important. It establishes that foundation, because there's anchors there when you have those parental blessings I was telling about. When kids run up against hard times at school or with friends, there's the anchors are still there. And hopefully they'll return to that and have the wherewithal to know that what they have at home is what grounds them. Many times when the parental blessing's missing, that's why gangs are very attractive, because gangs know how to do those things for kids.
Yeah, belonging, acceptance, the words, yeah. And that's why it's very enticing.
So I do talk about about rejection being a demon, and why Satan's like a roaring lion. He's looking, and with what works in the previous generation will work in the next generation. And that's what happened with me. There's 3 generations of rejection. Of course, there's my mom, of course, and then there was my grandfather, and then his father. They just kept rejecting and abandoning me. And so it sets up this recurring curse until it gets cut.
Yeah. And a lot of women will take that sort of rejection thing into relationships, and then they'll get rejected because they'll pick poor relationships.
Yes.
You mentioned something about fatherless homes. It's so important that there is a masculine and feminine in the household to raise children. Any psychologist of any credit will tell you that without one of either parent, there's a hole. And there's a lack. And women get shaped a lot and get blueprints from their father. Mothers get or sons get blueprints from their mothers, but the relationship between a daughter and mother are super important because she's the elder and she can help her daughter get through whatever is going on and grow up and stuff. And it's really needed. And there's things they can talk about that fathers and daughters really don't want to talk about. And there's things you wouldn't want to go to your dad and tell, but you can go to your mom and tell. But
and I had to do that. There wasn't enough grace in my home, and I didn't know my identity. And I shut down. I was very closed off. And there's a term I use in the book, emotional encroachment.
Oh.
And the metaphor I use for that is about the ancient boundary stone. When the Israelites were settling, you would mark off property by using the old stones. And God gave the commandment, do not move your neighbor's boundary stone. And there was a reason for that, a very important reason, because not everybody was honest, of course. And they would try to move that stone and enlarge their own territory. They were moving into their neighbor's property. With emotional encroachment, the same idea applies. Parents with ungodly motives or whatever, they will encroach into the child's heart and manipulate or deception and betrayal or lies or no information at all, which a lot of times I got or didn't get. And so the idea of emotional encroachment is that a child doesn't know what's theirs. Their goals, their emotions, their dreams, their viewpoints, everything is their own. It's their property. But when parents move in with these, very ungodly ways with behavior and so forth, erodes a child's identity. And they don't know who they are, what they believe in, or what they'll stand up to or stand against. And
if I can jump in here too, one of the aspects of narcissism, even if it's not full-blown narcissism, one of the aspects of narcissism is they have to devalue the people around you in order to gain control.
Yes.
And it's a control factor. Like you said, the gaslighting, the minimalizing, I've been around narcissists and I can be writhing in pain, like physical pain, and they can be oblivious to it.
They are.
I think a good example is last year, the regime in the Oval Office. There was a guy who had an attack in the Oval Office, a health seizure, something of some type, and the president just stood there, oblivious to it. That's an example of where all a narcissist thinks about is themselves. The world revolves around them. They don't even see people as people. Now, keep in mind, I do want to clarify this because this is in dating. Everyone's calling everyone a narcissist now. And there's only 3 or 5% of the people that are clinical diagnosis. It sounds like you had that going on as a mother, with a mother. And mother narcissism is really something you want to look up and study if you haven't already. And because it's a really weird thing because you expect nurturing from your mom.
Yes.
And that's how they tear down your identity. That's why you didn't feel like you were confident enough to go chase some of your dreams that you abandoned. But that's also control because they don't want you succeeding and getting out of their cage.
I always do that. Yeah.
They want you under control. They will sabotage you. They will undercut you. They will do things. And some people say that's not evil because it's a mental condition, but it is evil. I mean, it borders on sociopathic when you're starting to fuck with people. Yeah. And you're like, hey, I'm going to say, and whether they have that conscious thought or not, I mean, was Hitler evil because he was consciously evil, or was he just on a roll of being evil and he just went with it? And that was his nature. They're a little bit high on meth, all those Nazis, but still, to me, I just can't excuse it as not being evil. And I think we all have a duty in this life. I was thinking about this recently. I think we all have a duty in this life to try to be self-aware, to try to be conscious, to do things. Willful ignorance is not a fucking excuse. And I've done horrible things in my life that I wish I'd dealt with better, and it took me a lot of years to figure out my childhood trauma and what was complicating my behavior. It probably still does. But I eventually went on that journey and said, how do I fix myself? And so that's an important journey to go on. Hopefully most people that have these sort of issues eventually wake up, but usually narcissists don't wake up, especially malignant.
No. And And this estrangement would be on and off. And it was like she had the control of the button, and I was in, I was out, I was in, and I was out. There was actual physical stuff going on, shoving and all that. And but the thing is she never did want to be healed. It still doesn't.
Yeah.
We aren't responsible for the trauma that occurred to us when we were growing up, but we are responsible for our own healing. And that was huge to me when I started to have kids. I had to really think, okay, I'm not going to, the things that I had, they've got to end, cut it off at the root, because otherwise you're just pushing it down into your kids.
And if you don't mind me interrupting there, just to highlight your point, that is really important, because generational trauma gets passed down. Most likely your mother developed that way because of maybe her mother or father was a narcissist. And a lot of this emotional disconnect usually is passed down through generational trauma. A lot of times it's caused by divorce or other complications of marriage. And then the kids grow up with what we call a blueprint. And that blueprint is what they take into their parenting and their relationships. And that's all they know. That's all you know as a child, is what your parents' behavior is. So you have no clue. You're like, this seems really dysfunctional, but it feels normal, right? I've dated women that their level of chaos and dysfunction in a relationship isn't healthy for my what I hope is a healthy relationship, but they have to have abuse, chaos, problems. But to them, when you look at it from the outside, you go, that looks like a lot of brain damage work and emotional,
exhausting.
It's exhausting, right? But for them, that feels very comfortable. That's normal. And sadly, that's the blueprint they got from their parents.
And when I was growing up with it was all very normal to my family. Although I knew that I didn't want that life, I just didn't know how I was going to overcome some of those symptoms that I had.
But I think it's great you interrupted it. You recognize that this is not the way I want to raise my children, because I didn't feel comfortable in this situation, and I'm going to do something about it. And I think that is such a great conscious commitment to take and do and be aware of. I grew up the same way. My father, he did the best he could. That's all you can expect from some people. But he wasn't a good man sometimes. And I had to grow up going, okay, I realized somehow I figured out early on that I was going to pick up his blueprint. And so I had to start taking steps to try and clean my system so that I didn't become like him. And in a lot of ways, sometimes I did, especially when I got very successful at business and very narcissistic. But even then, I was still fighting. And I've spent most of I'll tell people stories. I'm like, here's a great lesson I learned in life. I learned this from my father by antithesis. And they'll be like, what does that mean? And I'm like, my father behaved the opposite of this way, and I felt that it was bad behavior that wasn't conducive or conductive for good relationships or for a healthy life. And so I do the opposite of what he did. And I have a lot of rules that are that way. And so I think it's just great that you made that conscious awareness and said, generational trauma stops here. Or at least you're going to try and stop it, right?
Yeah, no parent's perfect, but I went into it with the awareness that I was going to do things different. Not that there's two parents. My husband was also often out to sea. I had the kids to myself quite a bit, but my husband has his side also. And we talk about this a lot, his side and my side, but I will make a point. One thing is my dad and I had a very good relationship, and I wanted that same level with my mom. And I just kept trying to appease and approve. And I thought every milestone, once I finished college or once I got married, once I had kids, that it would change, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. And there's an event that finally happens where it's the, what do you call it? That decision moment and it was a kind of a very dark, scary thing that it's like, wow. Yeah. Go ahead.
And sometimes you got to isolate yourself just to protect yourself, right? Sometimes you have to cut yourself off from family and time yourself out because they're toxic. And you have to protect your health, and you got to protect the health of your family.
I think that was one of the reasons why God pulled me out of Kansas is I had a false understanding of what it meant to honor our parents.
Oh.
In the 60s, 70s, we didn't interrupt our parents. We didn't argue or negotiate. We were told what to do. This is the way it was, or there's the door. And so I forgot where I was going with that point. But it's an issue where I wanted to parent differently, and I wanted that approaching. I wanted to be approachable. And my dad was approachable. One thing in the book is that I also weave, it's a separate thread, a sub-story of 3 generations of mothers and daughters. So there's me, my mom, and my grandmother, my mom's mom. And my grandmother and I were close, and we were both trying to reach the same woman between us.
Wow.
That grieved us both, but she kept choosing darkness, and we aren't. That's what I was going to say. We think that the Bible says we always have to get along, and He doesn't want us to be hurt by toxic relationships. You can remove yourself, you can develop the boundaries. I do talk about boundaries of our heart. Again, we have to protect our heart, and it's not wrong to say, I'm going to step back. But those of us in the 60s and 70s, we grew up with some different kinds of traditional values that we have to undo. So I think that's why it took me a lot longer, because church didn't promote family dissension. They rarely supported divorce, back then. And rejection is so understudied. Did you know that only 1 in 4 are either rejected or estranged from a family member or parent?
Yeah, I do know that firsthand.
Yeah.
I've
It's
spent
very prevalent.
58 years with that.
Yeah. And so have you ever heard a conversation on a talk show like before Thanksgiving or Christmas where they talk about, the family's coming, the recipes to cook? Do they ever talk about family that's missing? Those outside the family, the child, the whatever. Yeah. And we don't. There's 12 steps to, what is that for alcoholics?
Yeah.
But there's 5 stages of grief. There's nothing for rejection.
Yeah.
There's no steps to find peace, so to speak. Yeah. And so that's kind of why my faith was what turned around.
Yeah. Sadly, these people need to go to therapy, and it's technically theirs to do, but they've already done the damage to you. So you probably also need to go to therapy or study like you've done and write books, because sometimes the teacher learns more than the student, right? Yeah. But this is really important in recognizing this. My father was a narcissist, and he was very disconnected emotionally from us. And I'm just not talking like men are technically a little disconnected from their children, because historically over eons of time, we tend to disappear. We get killed in battle. We get killed working hard jobs. We're always laboring to do stuff and provide for the family. And back in the medieval times, a bunch of marauders would come and kill all the men in the tribe and carry off the women and children. And so we're always expendable. That's why they say women and children first on the thing, because we have to protect the womb for future propagation of the species. And so men take that bullet. And so, it's a tough thing where men are disconnected a little bit. We learn, hopefully, as we grow to be a little bit more intimate, but we kind of have to have that disconnection. And women are designed, because they're the caregivers and the nurturers, they're designed to have that emotional closeness and connection. Yeah. And the two balance each other out, because the father will teach hard life lessons to the children. The mother will coddle the children and nurture them. And both those are important. Yeah. But it's also important that if I fell down and my knee was bleeding or hurt or something, I could go crying to my mom. And what's my mom going to do? She's going to nurture me. She's going to put the Band-Aid on and tell me it's going to be okay and comfort me, sing me a song or read me a book. My dad's going to go, oh, you hurt yourself? All right, you're going to live. Life's not fucking fair. Grow the fuck up, suck it up, and you're going to be fine. Yeah. And that's what dads do. They teach life lessons. Yeah. And sometimes that seems a little harsh, but man, if you've seen some poor soul who goes in the world and they haven't been taught that life isn't fair, they got a lifetime of problems coming.
Yeah. And part of the challenge in in life is to reconcile our past with our present and our future, and allow God's grace to help us to write a new story. If we only get one life, and I just can't imagine wanting to go through it or still stumbling along and never figuring out why I'm like this or why this doesn't work, and that the generational stuff there.
Yeah.
It's just so much. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And you have to save yourself. You almost have to be, I don't know about you, but I had to come to a conscious decision that I need to save myself. I can't save these people.
Yeah.
I need to save myself. And I'm not here. That's the biggest challenge. And so my father, he was disconnected emotionally more than most fathers, and in kind of a narcissistic sense too. My father never did anything wrong. I remember one time I just screamed at him. I said, I want you to tell me one thing you did wrong today. You turned left when you should have turned right. You stopped at a stop sign. Just one thing wrong. And he couldn't admit it. And somewhere around his 60s or 70s, I think with the encouragement of his second wife, he went to therapy for the first time. And he had some clarity, and he woke up from this march he'd been on most of his life, and he realized he'd fucked up. And he came to us, and we all had to sit down, and he opened up to us and said, I'm sorry, I've been to therapy. I didn't realize how disconnected I was. I didn't realize my behavior, and I'm now awake and I can see it. And we all thought, this is great. We weren't angry. We were like, cool. We finally got our dad. And then he went right back into it. I mean, last little week or something.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
And that's the challenge. And part of it is narcissism is a broken, damaged thing. And I'm sure he probably had some stuff you need to see a therapist about. It can take years, decades to fix those people, if they're fixable at all.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, narcissists don't acknowledge other people, and they don't acknowledge their no either.
Yeah. You're just a bot. You're just a subject to them. You're not human.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's a real defect of some sort. I don't know, not lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But yeah, they really are. What they do is always to benefit themselves and at the expense of others.
Yeah.
And I did see that a lot in my mom's behavior, but even all these years later, the strife, the constant strife and disunity is still going on. And I just decided I had to remove myself from that. And so it is unfortunate that there's a lot of us out there who probably have had to make choices like that.
Yeah. And religion will divide people too. That's what divides my family's religion. So, yeah, it's a big thing. And narcissism, moral superiority. And there's sometimes where parts of my family, we haven't talked for 10, 20 years. And you can't. And anytime you try and let them back in to just try and have a normal life, they don't understand how to normally interact with people without shoving stuff into your face and trying to get you to join their program. And I would take calls and I'd be like, okay, we're having a normal call. Hey, how's it going? How's your health? How's the, family and stuff? And then it turns into trying to demean my life, control my life.
Yeah, immediately goes to that you're doing everything wrong.
Within 5 minutes. And you're, the first couple minutes you're like, hey, this might work. And then you're like, oh, it's kind of like getting back together with people you broke up with. At first it's kind of cool and you're like, got those feelings again. But then you're like, oh yeah, it's fucking you again. I remember you. I now remember why I left you.
You mentioned something 5 minutes. In book 2, there is an incident. Within 5 minutes after we had arrived, we were leaving.
Oh, wow. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's a very sad experience. But
and it's got to be tough on the kids, too, because they're just kind of figuring out what's going on with mom and grandma and like, why aren't we a family? I remember my family. There was 3 brothers. I call them the 3 Stooges. And after my grandfather died, he was the great patriarch of our family. All the wives started infighting, and so the whole family separated. And one minute I had all these great cousins and all these great friends, and the next minute they were gone. And part of it was something that happened with one of them, and some Boy Scouts. Let's just put it that way. Believe it that, and I'm sure people can do the math. And that kind of broke the family up because the other brothers didn't know how to deal with something like that. Most people don't. I'm not sure I would if I had that in my family. And you know, it's just great that you stepped in and you saw that and you're sharing this message. Now, one question I have for you is, are all 3 books on Amazon? I found the one on your author page.
The book 2 is not yet out. It will be out in a couple of months. It's actually in the final interior editing stage. Book cover's done and so forth. And the title for the second one, a little forward hint, is When Good Isn't Good Enough.
Seen that movie?
Yes. Yeah. And then the third will be probably next year. But I am excited, though. It got picked up for a feature in Publishers Weekly.
Yeah.
Be appearing, I'm not sure, September or October issue. And the book will be heading off to Frankfurt, Germany for the book fair out there. So I'm excited for that too, to see what comes of that. But it's a message that I just feel like there's just too many of us that come from this kind of a background. We're still kind of going around in circles. How? Yeah. And the biggest thing for me was truth, knowing the truth.
Yeah.
Truth is seems to have showed me that you're not supposed to be like this. Your life is not meant to just be rejected.
Yeah.
They labeled you that. They labeled you as a victim, that you're always going to be, won't amount to anything. But God has the final say. And spiritual boundaries is another truth that we need to understand, that we have to be good stewards of our own.
Yeah, protect yourself, save yourself, set boundaries. And sometimes you have to say to those people that you love. It's really hard because we've had millions of followers across social media from the very beginning. We were really huge on Twitter when it started, Google Plus, and different places, LinkedIn, Facebook. We have huge groups there. And so I get a lot of trolls. I get a lot of people slinging shit at me. Sometimes I have friends that somehow they stayed friends with me on Facebook for a while, but they've always hated me. And then one day they decide to just let it all fly out on some post comment. And you're like, oh, I guess we're not friends after all. I can block those people. And then within an hour, I'll forget they exist because we block a lot of people. And on YouTube, the trolls are just endless. Your fingers are fat. You must be fat. You're like, dude, how much time do you have on your spare time? And what's my point to this? And so it's really easy for me to erase people and forget about them and move on. And if they encroach upon my boundaries of self-respect, of healthy mental health, whatever. Yeah. I'm starting to have a seizure or something because I'm just repeating stuff. But but you can't do that with your family. You're stuck with them. You can't pick your family. I can pick my friends, and I try and pick high quality people to have around me, but you can't pick your family. And that's kind of one of the things that's hard to deal with. You're like, geez, man, I'm stuck with these people for the rest of my life.
And I struggle with that. I when I was in my 20s, I kept thinking, I got a lot of years ahead of me. And I'm thinking, can I fathom not having this person in my life the rest of my life? And at that time, no. So I was still striving in my 20s and in my 30s, even into my 30s.
And you kind of feel some guilt too, right? Because you're like, I feel guilty about abandoning these people, or I'm supposed to love my family. The societal pressure there. I'm supposed to love my family. And
it is. And we're not okay. But I did almost everything I could have done, and it still wasn't good enough. But you mentioned mental health, and with my coaching with kids, this is kind of where that comes from. Is youth mental health is a real crisis right now, because we've got families and kids are just with the social media stuff. Girls are so enmeshed in it, and it is.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, and so
everyone's a zombie now, just looking at their phones, including me sometimes.
I know. Yeah, it's sad. And that's why the coaching kids, building up self-confidence and fear of failure and mindset skills, resilience. So that's an area that I'm really interested in and sort of a new business that I'm trying to get going. So I have been really appreciative to be on your show and to share that. And it's just been real enjoyable to get this out there.
Yeah. let's talk about some of the offers you have on your website. Now, do you only do children's coaching, or do you do coaching for maybe adults too?
I've thought about that. It's possible. The book kind of tends to lean towards women, mothers and daughters and that stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean it's just women, but I've been entertaining that. Yes.
Yeah. The thing with women is women's value, they place more of a value on society's value of them. That's why they try and stay away from doing anything embarrassing that and so rejection, when it comes to dating or a parental rejection, it's a bigger deal for them, I think, than it is for most men, because with most men we have control of the ask, so we can ask anybody on a date if we want. But for women, sometimes rejection, they feel like, oh, a guy rejected me that I liked. Oh, I must be worthless. I must be a loser. I must not have value. I actually, somebody wrote that, a gal wrote that the other day on Facebook in one of my dating groups. She wrote, she actually said this, am I a loser because I get with men and they leave after a month or two?
Oh.
And so I wrote her and I said, no, that doesn't make you a loser. Just because someone doesn't like you doesn't mean a loser. There's a million flavors of the people in the world, and then you're trying to find somebody who's your flavor, and then who's single.
Yeah,
I found plenty of married women that are my flavor. They're married, so I'm trying to find one that's marriageable, and so I think it impacts women harder, that word rejection, because they feel that it's part of their value, and that's why sometimes I've rejected women and they've taken it really badly. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And I don't know why you'd take badly being rejected by me, because I'm not all that great. So
well, there is something
I probably blessed some people when I rejected them. They're like, oh, I dodged a bullet.
There is something called the hypersensitivity. When you've been rejected, you zero in on the next.
Yeah, your trauma's getting triggered, right?
Yeah, and you have to kind of reason with yourself. Maybe it was some of the things. He had some hangups too. Maybe it's just. You never know.
People are just, sadly, I come from this, but back, I think you're probably within 10 years or so of my age, but when our age, or at least my age, when we grew up, when people didn't work out, they got divorced or they broke up, you would always say this thing, it takes two to tango, 50% both ways. But for some reason now, people think of it as, it must be me. And maybe this is from childhood wounds or something. They take it really personal sometimes. Yeah. And I can understand sometimes you do get feelings and that can hurt. And that may be why it impacts women more, is because to them, they feel it probably more than us. Us men are pretty stoic most of the time. and we're so used to rejection from asking women out on dates and our lives and what we try to achieve in our hero's journey. The world isn't given to us. And so I think it hurts women more because they can feel it. And
we tend to be a little more in the emotional. We look inside a little deeper, size ourselves. And I don't know if that's part of the mother thing that we get printing, down through the mother gene or what. But you're right. I'm definitely.
Women's nature is designed to have that feedback and that insecurity, and it's done that way so that she preserves herself and is supposed to have a mindful awareness of preserving herself and how her behavior can affect her social status in life. Sadly, we've turned it upside down now, where if you have an OnlyFans, you're more respected than someone who goes to church every weekend. And so we see that as the top tier. I see a lot of women that are really caught up with Instagram and richness, and they only want top tier guys. And you're like, look at them and you go, you don't qualify for top tier guys, because I'm a top tier guy. And yet they get angry when you reject them. But still, I think women are designed to know what their social value is, and to also try and make sure that they don't embarrass themselves, embarrass their families. And so I think it's a big deal for them. Now, I see there's a few things on your website too. We should get plugs in here for you. Do some speaking. There's a schedule a call. Tell us how people can interact with you. And what is your child coaching client look like?
Anywhere from 8 to 13. I've had 9 and 10-year-olds. that I've coached. I can coach online through a Zoom Connect or in person. My husband and I split our time from Washington State and Arizona, so I kind of bounce back and can coach in either place. I like to do workshops. I can do workshops online. I call them skill shops because we learn skills.
Yeah, skills.
Yeah. And I do have it's not on the website yet because it is actually being redone. It's supposed to be finished this week. But if the unique difference on my coaching is that I use coaching stories, and coaching stories help connect the mindset skill that the kids are there for to learn about it through the characters of the story, which are age appropriate stories. They're well written stories. I really enjoy them. And the kids then can put their feelings and your thoughts together by going through the story. By going through the story, they identify their limiting beliefs, their emotions, what's going on, because sometimes they don't have the skills to know the words for it. And so the stories help bring that out, and there's a lot of connection. And then we come up with supporting beliefs for what they're identifying. And we have activities that reinforce it. And what I wanted to say is, if anybody is listening and would like a free coaching story, that is something that I can send out on an email. I'm not sure how that would be done, how I'd get their email to send it to. But you could also email me, just give out my email, lphillips 4487@gmail.com. If you're interested in a free coaching story, just put that in the subject line, free coaching story.
So people can reach out to you on your website. As we round out, give us that website one more time.
www.authorlisaphillips.net.
Wonderful insight, Lisa, and I'm so glad you're sharing your story with people, because a lot of people go through this. I mean, sometimes it's not full-blown narcissism, but there's enough narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And sadly, people blanket. I go on dates, and girls tell me the last 10 guys they dated were narcissists. And I'm like, were you outside the narcissist clinic picking up dudes? What the fuck? But there's narcissistic tendencies. And and I had to look at some of my grandparents and say they had trauma. I don't know what it was because, they were pretty old, and it wasn't like I could have a conversation at 10. I couldn't diagnose my grandmother at 10. I just knew what I was experiencing, and it didn't feel good. And I was lucky enough, I don't know how it is with parents and they get divorced. I was lucky my parents didn't divorce until after we moved out. And then when they called us and said, we're going to get divorced about 10 years after we moved out, we were like, cool. We're just glad you guys finally got on the same page we've been on for 20 years. They were good people. They just weren't the two people that were meant to be together. We just knew they were oil and water. But it's great that you've stepped in and you've given people some advice and knowledge to be aware of generational trauma. You should probably I don't know if you cover that in any of your books, but that might be a good book thing to talk about. It's generational trauma, how to step in, how to stop it. Because we're seeing this now where you're just seeing the same trauma replayed through 2 or 3 generations until somebody finally goes, I'm not doing this.
Not doing it.
It's usually gotten so bad that you just don't have a choice. And you do have to realize that a lot of these people, if they have severe damage trauma, if they have some of these tendencies that devalue you, you're never going to save them. And trying to do that is just, I hate to say it's a waste of time, but the problem with trying to save them is you put your heart and soul and your emotions into it because you care.
I do.
And these are not usually the people that are going to respond with your care in kind.
Years ago, my dad and my stepmother, I used to say, it's not you. But I had such downloaded my mother's emotions and anger that I still questioned it. I still wonder what's wrong with me.
Yeah, and you just want to be loved. You're a kid. You're just like, I have needs. I need a hug, and I need somebody to talk to, and I need somebody who tells me good job, and pats me on the back, and when you don't have that, it's just freaking lack. And you need that the most when you're a child. Right now, I don't give a shit about any of that stuff, but I did as a child. Right now, I'll just be like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. If you don't like me, great.
It shapes us. It does. And we're wired and we have to learn new wiring, basically.
Yeah. But making a decision that generational trauma stops with me is such a powerful thing. And the earlier you can recognize that, especially before you bring some new innocent palettes into the world that you're going to paint on, keeping them from that damage. And then you got a whole new pickle, right? Because then you got a grandparent. You have to keep the kids. So it's not only you anymore.
Yeah, I have a granddaughter now that will never know that.
Wow.
And I'm just so thankful. My kids, I did have to cut them off from their grandmother, and they don't know they know my story, but they don't know the personal one-on-one with it. You know, there's sacrifices everywhere. There's losses everywhere when you have to make a change. So
I just wish they would teach more of this stuff in school. They need to have a trauma class in school, and they need to be able to make people aware of, did you have trauma? Are you having trauma right now? And let's see if we can't get that fixed for you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't make all the rules, evidently. Evidently, the people in power of education don't listen to my podcast.
I just wish they'd bring back cursive writing.
Yeah, that was interesting back in the day. It's been wonderful to have you, Lisa. Give people your final pitch out to pick up the book and give a plug your .com.
So this is the cover of the book, Written Off, Navigating Rejection and Faith in the Search for Love, Family, and Belonging.
Order it up today, folks, wherever fine books are sold. Thank you, Lisa. Written Off, Navigating Rejection and Faith in Search of Love, Family, and Belonging. And it's part of the Approved in Christ series. So watch for book 2 and 3 and maybe what else might come. But sharing our stories is brave, and that's a whole new level of rejection, putting a book up, right? Kudos to you for sharing your story, and you're going to help way more people than people maybe, reject the book. And there's somebody out there that needs this book, and they're going to read it, and it's going to change their life. And maybe you'll hear about it, maybe you won't, but that's the beautiful part about the reach of this. So thank you. And thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity. Refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives, or I'll pull the car over and I'll come back there, kids. Anyway, I love you guys. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.